All right, here we are live. Amanda, nice little pre-show conversation. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself? Thank you for joining the show. I'm really excited to have this conversation. But yeah, for listeners, can you just give a little bit of background as to who you are, what you're up to in Mexico, and we can go
Of
from there.
course. And thanks for having me on the show. It's very exciting to be on this podcast. So, a little bit about myself. Originally from Los Angeles, but I've been in Mexico for the last 6 years. Currently, I'm here with Oyster Financial. We're building a small medium business neobank. So essentially, we're looking to provide better financial services for business owners in Mexico. A little bit more, I studied business and psychology at Emory University. Straight out of college, I went to India, actually, not really so excited about the traditional business opportunities to be a consultant, jump into finance. And it gave me an awesome opportunity to really learn about entrepreneurs. I dove really deeply into social entrepreneurship, so different sectors and how we could find that intersection between business and doing good for the world. That brought me to Village Capital, where years later, or a couple years later in the US, I ran my first program with them was Health Entrepreneurs in Boston. And they gave me the opportunity to come here to Mexico and launch their programs here. And that's kind of where my career in entrepreneurship really took off. First, running the accelerator for Village Capital, expanding that across Latin America, starting with financial inclusion, going to other sectors like health, education. Then I led the VC fund at a corporate called Compartamos Banco. It's a microfinance bank. It was the Fiinlab fund. We had a portfolio of 9 financial inclusion investments there. And then from there, I really started to wonder how good of an investor I could ever be if I didn't have that entrepreneur experience. So I found Vilash and Gabo and the team at Oyster. Actually, we reviewed them in our pipeline. We got really excited about the SMB opportunity in Mexico and in Latin America. Such an untapped market. There's big saturation right now in terms of neobanks for consumers, but financial products at large, both in Mexico and abroad, are just totally missing for small, medium businesses. So saw a really exciting opportunity, great market opportunity as well, amazing team, and here I am.
Nice, nice. I love it. When you say the products that neobanks are not providing, what is that
Yeah.
exactly? Just for my own headspace.
So in terms of like neobanks specifically in Latin America, there's a lot of great businesses that are on the consumer side. So we're seeing like Fondeadora, Cuenca, Albo. In Mexico and across the region, there's lots of banks that serve individuals, but almost nobody serves the small, medium businesses. And not just in neobanks, like the actual traditional banks are a pain. If you're, I don't know, I haven't tried to open a bank account in the US. Maybe you could compare it with me there. But here, my boyfriend starting his company, he's tried with 3 Mexican banks. Each of them have taken about 2 months to open. They need to do physical home checks. So they come to our door with no announcement. It's supposed to be an office check, but it's home office, right? So this is our office. So to verify that you have a legitimate business, they show up, but there's just no user experience. Everything is very traditional processes. They don't consider the kinds of new data and user experiences that you could use to really serve a business owner. So you end up, yeah.
That's crazy. That's crazy. Why did they need to send a human being out to your house? What are they inspecting you for? Like
Yeah.
fraud of not having a house?
So it's actually part of the Mexican law that for formalized banks, so banking institutions, not fintechs, you have to go to the site of the office. My understanding is that a lot of that is anti-money laundering, making sure it's not connected to anything with drugs or anything illicit, that they could come to your home and see if you say that you're a small business owner, you have certain income, that you don't have a Ferrari outside. So they want to like see that you have a
Mm,
legit business operation, but not all businesses have an office, right? So they end up going to your home, which
mm,
is very invasive. The law is progressing a little bit because of COVID. Banks and financial institutions can now apply to do it over video, but a lot of banks haven't done that yet,
mm.
evident by people knocking at our doors, strangely. um,
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty strange. So if you live in the middle of nowhere, I mean, say you live 100 miles outside the city. They're sending someone out to, I mean, will they do that? It seems like a tremendous amount of resources to open
It's
a
an
bank account.
amazing example of the inefficiencies that exist here. And yes, if you want to open a formal business bank account, not a consumer account, but a business bank account in Mexico, the bank agent needs to go to you. So you could just imagine all the brick and mortar costs, the people costs, the sales force, all of these offline traditional activities. One, are costly, but two, are just inefficient for everybody involved. It's uncomfortable for everybody involved because we're not using the mobile, the web, all the different kinds of touch points that we have that didn't exist when these laws were created 50, 100 years ago.
Yeah, that's pretty wild. How many people live in
Yeah.
Mexico? So I think there's 300 million in the
Yeah.
US. Do you know off the top of your head how
About
many are in Mexico?
125 million.
Yeah, so it's a little less than half the size of the US. Is a good
In population,
like
yeah. Yeah.
rule of thumb. Yeah. And then do you think about from a business perspective, the size of the market being, how do you
Yeah.
think about that? People, unbanked, or yeah, I'm
So
curious.
there's formalized business and unformalized businesses, but from the government data, the best we know, before COVID, there was 4.1 million businesses of all sizes, small, medium, large, micro, in Mexico. But the latest data that came out is that a quarter of those businesses, so 1 million businesses, closed in the last year. So we're probably hovering
1
1
million
million
businesses?
businesses. And so
That's
in
gnarly.
Mexico, 70% or a little bit over 70% of the jobs come from small, medium businesses. And so if you imagine a million businesses, that's most of the jobs, or a lot of the jobs in Mexico have been lost over the last year. So it's definitely a difficult time, and there's a lot of effort we need to do to rebuild the economy.
Oh my God. In the US, as you probably know, there's a huge tax, not a tax, it's a stimulus bill. There's multiple $1 trillion bills. And, I check my mail and it's like
Yeah.
$1,000 in the mail. I didn't even hear about one of them. And I'm just thinking, this can't be the right solution long term.
Mhm.
At best, it's a band aid that's effective, but it seems like just printing money and then sending not just some money to people who need it, but just blanketing the entire country with free money like airdrops just doesn't. I don't know. I'm not firm on my opinion on it, but it just doesn't seem like we warrant that in our current state of affairs. I mean, this has been COVID is obviously very difficult for a lot of people, but it's not the Black Plague. Like it's not killing 30% of people who get it. It's some fraction of a percentage. And so I'm thinking, what do you feel that in Mexico there's a good balance between the the costs of shutting down businesses and the costs and the benefits of the influence of COVID on there? I presume this is what, yeah, boosts why a million businesses are shut down in the last year. I'm curious to hear what you think of that.
So, I mean, net, we've lost about 500,000 jobs, and the Mexican government is not giving these kinds of stipends that you see in the US.
Hmm.
There is almost nothing for low income people besides businesses, like other programs that were already existing, like pensions and for select groups of society. And for businesses late in the game, a few loans came out, but I mean, it was accessible to very few businesses, and clearly that's not going to help generate the economy again. One
Hmm.
study that always stuck with me, in Africa 5-10 years ago, they did a study where they gave a few hundred businesses $40,000 each, just blanket, with no strings attached, no program or education attached, and they gave nothing to the rest of those businesses. And they did see that those that had that 40,000 K boost at the beginning, they survived longer, they generated
Hmm.
more jobs. And the jobs piece, I think, and tying back to like, well, how do we create sustainable, how do we keep people out of poverty in a sustainable way? I think that that's really interesting. And what uh, giving stipends to businesses can do, and especially small, medium businesses, to create more jobs, to keep people in the market where they are self-employed, where they're not depending on the job market, and so they're a little bit less susceptible to fluctuations in the market. And like you said, I don't have a strong opinion on it either. I think stipends are difficult and needs a lot more research. But I think the aspect of loans is where you can find like a happy balance. And especially with the kind of creative loans that a government can give where it's 0% interest or over long periods of time and flexible to the needs of businesses. So I think it was an amazing initiative that the government did give some loans to businesses. The problem is that it still left a huge gap. Over the last year, the traditional banks have given out less and less loans because it's harder to underwrite the businesses. There's more fear because of COVID, the economy is going poorly. They can't afford to have bad debt. They can't afford to have businesses not pay them back. So they just don't give out the loan. So we've seen with our early pilots, about 40% of the businesses that we offer a loan to take it. It's a 40% take rate. It's huge for any product. So the demand for credit and something to help keep we say it in Spanish, las cortinas arriba, the curtains open. How do you keep your business open? There's huge demand for credit or any kind of solution to get over this hump.
Yeah, I'm curious to learn more about this. So Oyster does a few different things. Is it correct to say you're why don't you tell me what are the key products that the company offers? You guys just raised some money, like 20 million Series A couple months ago. We're recording in May. It was in February?
I think our last announcement was a bit below that, but yes, we've raised a few million for the business, and that's with fantastic investors, Monashees, SV Latam, S7, that's now Sidious, Ulu. I'm sure I'm missing half of them there. We have a fantastic group of investors supporting us. And yeah.
Oh, I actually was confusing it. There's a company, Oyster, out of the UK. Is that UK?
There's one in the UK. There's one in Australia. We've actually had to go with Crunchbase and ask them to like unmerge us with some HR account. Surprisingly, Oyster is a fantastic brand that a lot of people would love to have.
Why is that? Is there something? What's the concept of an oyster? I guess oyster has it's got a pearl in it.
Yeah, that's part of it.
People want the pearl. They're hunting for the pearl.
The way that we see an oyster, so there's two main elements, right? There's the shell and there's the pearl. So the shell is security, the kind of bank that we're trying to build, or the financial institution we want to build. We want to make sure that our customers know that their funds are secure, that it's well protected. And what's on the inside is this pearl, which is really the most precious thing. And what this pearl is it's an insight. If you think of, do you know how pearls are made? Super obscure.
Ooh, I think isn't it from sand? They're like compressing sand.
So it's this little piece of useless sand that's compressed and polished over time until it becomes something beautiful and precious. And that's the way that we see our customers' financial data. There's this entire sea of sand out there. There's all this financial data that nobody really knows how to use. Nobody understands their accounts receivable, their accounts payable. Do I need a loan? How much can I afford? It's super confusing to run the financial side of your business as an emerging business owner. And so we want to take all that sand, all that financial data that you have, and condense it into an insight, something valuable for you. And so really what Oyster wants to build is not just another bank account. We don't just want you to put your funds with us and then you're done. We want to help you build your businesses by giving you the kinds of insights you need on the data that you're able to share with us. So that's kind of the two elements, is being able to give you something precious in these financial insights, as well as keeping you safe and keeping your funds safe.
I dig it. And Mexican, or not Mexican, but Spanish is the language on the website. Is the concept that this is going to be specifically targeted to Mexico as a first market, or is it in other markets? I'm curious what the rollout is. Most companies would launch in the US, roll to Latin America. I'm curious what the strategy is there.
So especially with a name like Oyster, I get that question. It's not the easiest thing for people to pronounce or understand in Latin America.
How do you say it in Spanish?
It's a little softer.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And so, yes, our first market is Mexico. We do plan to expand regionally in Latin America and perhaps the Hispanic US market. But really what we're building is an infrastructure for an international company. Our co-founders are Gabo and Vilash. Vilash is originally from India, studied in the US. He has international experience. He was investing with Naspers. He also helped build the infrastructure for business banks in Germany. So like he's built this before abroad. He sees the global scope. And on the other end with Gabo, we have this deep payments expertise. He was the country manager of Mercado Pago here in Mexico. He built the first debit card for Amazon in the world here in Mexico. He was with Prosa, which is one of the financial entities kind of on the back end here. So we have this amazing combination of deep knowledge in payments and banking, both locally and abroad. And so the way that we're seeing this business is that Mexico is the market we know best. It's where there's a huge problem to serve small, medium businesses, but small, medium businesses need a better solution all over the world. And where we could help those business owners, we look to grow there one day.
Yeah, I dig it. I want to ask you for a minute about Village Capital. So Village Capital is interesting because they have offices. Is it all over the world, or they have it in 3 states? I've read a couple: Massachusetts, New York, California. They're in Mexico. I'm curious what they do at large, and then what you specifically did when you were in Mexico.
Yeah. So out of college, that was my first, you call it formal job, was working with Village Capital, which is an accelerator and an investment fund, all focused on impactful companies. So they have operations. I haven't been with them for a few years, but they're still very close. The headquarters are in DC. The fund is based out of San Francisco, but they have formal operations in India, Africa, and Mexico, as well as a lot of other programs across Europe, even in East Asia. Everything in the Latin America is run out of the Mexico office. So we do work with entrepreneurs in Brazil, Colombia, Chile, Argentina, and many other countries across the region. And what's really cool and game-changing about Village Capital is that they believe that who understands entrepreneurs best are the entrepreneurs. So throughout the program, it's a 3-month program. It's like one intensive weekend or a session, 4-day session per month. And over these 12 sessions, everything that the entrepreneurs learn is how to think like an investor. So what do investors look for in market? What do they look for in building a team? What do they look for in exit opportunities? And then the entrepreneurs are trained to score each other as if you're an investor scoring your investment opportunities. And then at the end of the program, the 2 highest peer-ranked companies are the ones that the company and that Village Capital invests in. So it's
peer-ranked
So
companies.
you don't have this top-down, like I'm the investor and I know best about your market. We have 12 fintech entrepreneurs, financial inclusion entrepreneurs who deeply understand Latin America, who are living it day to day, who are learning together, and then they rank each other.
Wow, that's a little bit like picking, like the prom queen or the prom king, where it's kind of does it always surface the best company? I mean, can it be kind of a little political?
Hey, it takes a lot of maturity, and we do train the entrepreneurs, and there's a lot of different ways that we protect the system so that it's really something that we could trust in. Yes, there are entrepreneurs on occasion who try to game the system, but better than anybody, your reputation is everything in entrepreneurship. And if you're going to game the system for a $50,000 check, I don't know how far your business is going to get.
Yeah, that's true.
But beyond that, there's statistical checks. Everything is run through a Z-score, so we're able to see in the system that if you're a tough grader and I'm an easy grader, we level those out so that we're able to compare scores in a more even way. In each session, there's practice sessions so that people could actually really learn how to use the instrument and really rank each other in a meaningful way, gather the data that they're missing. And you have 3 months to figure this out. So by the 4th and final evaluation, it's a pretty serious score.
Yeah, I would imagine. And you must have saw thousands of startups, right? During your time, you were there, 5 years, 3 years, 4 years? So, what do you think about the Mexican startup market versus other Central American countries or South American
Yeah,
countries, or versus the US? Maybe I'm curious what you saw from the inside.
definitely. It's been an amazing time to be in Latin America from 2014 to today. In 2014, we were hustling so hard just to get, I think we got like 49 applications for fintech companies, and we mapped somewhere a little bit over 100. Today, if you look at the Finovista radar, they've announced like 500 fintech companies just in Mexico. And you could really feel it. Like this boom of fintech's really happening. I know you've covered a lot on the podcast around Bitcoin, crypto. We see the same thing. Like, it was founded or it was launched in 2009, but 2014 is when things really started moving. We started like Bitso, who just had a huge investment round announced. We got to see them in early stage. We've seen other companies come and go that don't exist here anymore. So it's been a really cool time to be here. But coming back to your question, all that is to say that the entire region is growing. And I do see Mexico growing a lot faster than a lot of other countries in Spanish speaking Latin America. But there is also amazing innovation coming out of other countries. Mexico has the benefit. We have a bigger population than any other Spanish speaking country in Latin America. We have the free trade agreement with the US. So we have all those benefits of the economy shared with the US. And we have a great entrepreneur ecosystem. There's more and more investors, accelerators. We're starting to see even Y Combinator just in the last few years have started to invite Latin American companies, a lot of them also from Mexico. We have Andresine, who invested in Cuenca. I think it's his first investment in Latin America, if I'm not mistaken. So we're seeing all this amazing investor excitement about Latin America, and a lot of that is based around Mexico.
Yeah. No, it's really difficult to build products like, so I'd say consumer social products. Maybe like some SaaS, like simple SaaS B2B tools for developers. But there's so much like what you guys are doing. There's so many business specific tools and even social networks. I mean, I would imagine that like a company, say like Facebook, is going to rebrand their product with Spanish on their website. Language is it's an interesting divide or an interesting border, because on one hand, it stops one company from creating a product and then immediately offering it to the entire world. Like I speak Spanish un poco, a little bit, but I speak no Icelandic. So if someone from Iceland launched a product, I mean, they speak English there, but say Chinese, it prevents, even if there was completely free trade and no rules at all from the government didn't block us, it'd be difficult to just, spin up a website and then rebrand everything for the audience. Companies do it, you can do it, but more so than the language is the country specific nuances. Just the way that people expect to do things. As you know, in payments, every country is so different. Like in the US, everyone has credit cards. People buy stuff with credit cards. That's not necessarily the way people do it in Argentina or a lot of South American countries, where they just don't think to use a credit card. They would just use a debit card or pay in cash and just pay with the money they have. And there's a lot of things I see like that are very specific to countries that you don't notice until you go somewhere else. Like maybe 5 years ago, I went to Colombia, and in Colombia, they would never give their credit card at a restaurant to anyone. You would never, here in America, you just give your credit card, they go in the back, when you're at a restaurant, they swipe it and they bring you the receipt, but everyone comes out with the terminal, they stick it in the thing, and then you sign your thing. And that was very different, obviously different. And I'm thinking there's got to be tremendous opportunity for people down there to build products that are specific to their own markets. I wonder how it shakes out. Like, I wonder what the trends are on this. That, like, every country in South America speaks Spanish, except for Brazil speaks Portuguese.
In Suriname, but yeah,
largely.
Almost. You talk about kind of Hispanic Latin America as one market, and Brazil is its own different market.
Brazil is its own world. Yeah, and it's interesting how they kind of carve out their own niche. there's like Mexico seems to be the largest largest Central American market for sure. And what else? Mexico. We were talking about the what would you call that? Like the cartel problems. So I think
Yeah.
that's kind of specific in Mexico,
Well,
where it's. I wonder if there's like a startup opportunity to somehow improve that situation. Or that would be the kind of thing where it's like, okay, this is a big opportunity to improve this, but this is not a problem in other countries, but still worth
yes.
doing. Um, yeah, I don't know.
No,
I don't know. I'm curious if you have any thoughts. If you've seen any startups that are like that would work in one market, it would work in Mexico, but not the U.S.
yeah, you touched on a bunch of really interesting points there. So yeah, in terms of like the language differences, the cultural barriers, every country in Latin America is super different. But a lot of the expansion of businesses you kind of separate into like Hispanic speaking or Spanish speaking Latin America and Brazil, which is its own market with its own challenges.
Yeah.
For example, like Brazil, almost everybody uses a credit card. Literally, when I went to visit one of the
Mm.
startups we invested in with Fiinlab there, I spent an afternoon walking around in park, and I see a guy carrying around like pizza boxes, like kind of Pizza Hut like heating boxes, and he had a terminal, like a payment terminal, in his hand, walking in the park because he was just an ambulant pizza salesman who accepts card. Everybody in Brazil uses card, and that's a huge difference compared to Mexico, for example, where over 60%, 63% of the population don't even have a bank account. Um, and Colombia is very
Wow.
similar in terms of, yeah.
How does that work? I mean, how can you, how 63% of people don't have a bank account? So for most people, they're working at a local business. They're getting paid in paper, and they're just storing that in their
So
house. Is that how most people are
in
doing it?
Mexico, 90% of transactions are done in cash. In terms of formal employment, legally, all employers need to pay employees into bank accounts, although there is also informal workers. And that's a big part of the economy as well. But a very funny thing that you'll see, and this is the same really in Mexico or Brazil or anywhere else, is the paydays, the 15th and the end of the month. Huge lines around the block. Another huge problem with these brick and mortar banks is that everybody goes to these ATMs to take out money, and you could literally be more than an hour in line if you go on the wrong day, because on payday everybody cashes out. You may have a bank account, and so there's a big conversation around, well, there's 63% that are unbanked, that don't have any bank account, and of those, the 37% that are left, a lot of them are underbanked because they get paid into these formalized bank accounts, they take it all out into cash, and then it moves the cash economy.
Oh, wow. That's super interesting. So it's like they're using, is it that the government is pushing people to use electronic
Yeah.
payments? And people are kind of, as soon as they get paid in their bank account, they're just pulling it out and using cash anyways?
So the government tried a couple of years ago to launch an initiative called Código Digital, the digital code, and they're basically QR codes. And they forced all banks to offer QR codes to the businesses so that they could start, or to everybody, to start collecting funds or receiving payments via QR codes. I guess the nice thing there is that you're now creating this payment method where it's 0% commissions. So unlike a payment terminal
Mm.
or e-commerce, there's no commission taken out of it straight into your bank account. The negative side there is that because it's a government initiative that has no incentives and it's only for banked people, even though it's designed as a financial inclusion mechanism, it only helps you get payment if you already have a bank account. And so it never latched on. Like there's a similar digital payments process happening in Brazil right now that I've heard is going incredible. But there's just no incentive for people in Mexico to move away from cash.
Really? I mean, I would think that the incentive is that no one can
Yeah,
just steal it
you would think
from
that.
you while you have it in your
So,
pocket. Or isn't there a lot of just inherent
oh,
benefits in
totally.
using
It's
electronic
it's much
payments?
safer. I mean, you don't have in Mexico, we call it the robo hormiga, the ant stealer, which is when you spend a little bit of money here and there and you don't see all your money disappearing because you have it on hand. So you don't have the robo hormiga. You don't have the actual possibility of somebody stealing your cash. But here's the thing is, where is the trust in the system? Do you trust yourself or do you trust the banks? And there's such low trust in banks in Mexico that people rather just hold on to it. I mean, the majority of the, yeah.
Why is that? Is that banks stolen from people, or why do they get such a bad rap?
So there are a lot of cases where it's come out in the news that money from pension funds or different poor investments from banks will go missing. And so that's a piece of it. But like, as a foreigner, if you go on, or even as a local, you go on any blog and you're like, hey, typing in, which bank account should I open? And the answers that you get are not which bank accounts to open. It'll be which bank's accounts not to open for all the terrible things that have happened. And everybody has a story of the ATM stole my money, or there was a fraud incident that the bank never took care of. Customer service is really weak and unreliable. And it's funny because we have this kind of catch-22 where we speak to customers. I've been doing interviews all week with customers, and a lot of them say, I just don't know if I could trust Oyster because if I have a problem, where do I go? Where's the branch? Because we're a branchless model. And so it's very much that mentality, though the reality is when you speak to somebody and you're like, last problem you had, did you go to a physical bank? Yes. What happened? They told me I needed to call this number, or they told me they couldn't solve it, or they're putting in the case and it'll be 60 days. So we see all of these problems that the traditional channels aren't working, but people trust what they could physically see. And there's just such low trust in the banking system in general that people would just rather have cash on hand. And I mean, it makes sense. If in Mexico, yeah. Go ahead. Yeah, I was
Go
going to say
ahead.
that there's a huge part of the population that lives on like less than $400 a month. So if you earn less than $400 per month for your entire family, you're not going to mess with that money. Like, you need every single cent for your gas, for your kids' education, for food, and you just don't want to trust the bank with some kind of a commission that might appear because you went below a minimum or something that you didn't understand.
Or they withhold it or something like that. I mean, is cryptocurrency available to people? Are they? Do people generally understand what Bitcoin is, and how is blockchain and cryptocurrencies affected the average person in the city with respect to payments and financial tools?
Is it big? Yes. Is it common? No. So like, if you ask people what Bitcoin is, educated tech people living in big cities will often know quite a bit. But if you just talk to, like when you come in town, talk with your Uber drivers and see what they know. A lot of common Mexican people don't speak so much about crypto. It's not a huge thing. There's awareness, but it's not seen as like a big deal. If anything, it's seen as like exciting in terms of like the investment opportunities, the speculation. The Mexican peso consistently goes down in value over time. So a lot of people look to the dollar and alternatives to see how can I keep the value of my money. That's why, have you heard of Bitso? It's a company to just...
Yeah, I have.
So
I
they
have
just
heard of
got
it.
a $2.2 billion valuation. It's a Mexican-based company, Mexican founders.
Wow.
And so they processed 1.2 billion in remittances last year. Billion. So
wow. So it's working.
Like, there are people that are using it for remittances, but like sometimes that's on the back end, right? Like, I might not directly do like crypto wallet to crypto wallet, but I might be working with a financial institution that does. So the potential is there, not just for remittances, but we even there's a business that was started not too far from here, 20 minutes from where I am right now. It's called the Bitcoin Embassy. It's a burger joint. It's like the center of the crypto community. A lot of events go on there, and you can pay in Bitcoin or pay in crypto money to buy a burger. So like, not to say it's a big adoption. There's not a lot of businesses that will accept crypto, but like, it exists, it's emerging, and there's huge opportunities.
Yeah, it seems like in a place where this is kind of true in Africa, where there's not a lot of banking infrastructure or just fintech infrastructure at all. And most people in Africa, at least I worked with a lot of folks in Nigeria, they are using paper tender. They're cashing out at a bank, very similar kind of thing where the trust in the banking system is super low. And so they just want to have it in their hand. And once they get it, once they kind of understand the concept of where the trust in Bitcoin and cryptos are, then it's like wildfire. It just, people catch on. Everyone has a smartphone. And I don't know if it's got to be the
Yep,
same in Mexico, right? At this point,
totally.
everyone has smartphones. So it's like, well, once you get it and you can have access to your coin on your phone. And I feel like we're is it a tipping point thing where it's just kind of in the collective consciousness enough, and then all of a sudden, bam, it just goes like wildfire. Like it seems to be the case in Nigeria that has happened. I'm curious if that is the setup here in Mexico, or maybe South America at
I
large.
see bigger opportunities with that in economies where the local currency is more volatile, like especially Venezuela. Even you
Mm,
see a little bit in Colombia and Argentina, a
yeah.
lot. But Venezuela in that economy where there is just huge problems. I mean, everybody is digitized there is first. Almost all payment transactions are digital. There's very low trust in the local economy. So people are trying to smuggle in dollars when they can. People are trying to see any
Mm,
way to keep the value of their currency. And Bitcoin, blockchain, different types of cryptocurrencies have really blown up in Venezuela. I think that's the extreme of where we could get to. In Mexico, I think without those extreme conditions, it's going to be a lot slower. And that's one of the promises that we
mm,
talk a lot when we're talking about financial inclusion. How do we get people banked? How do we give them better financial solutions? There's a lot of promise in decentralized money, but there's already so little trust in technology, so little trust in the banks. For people to jump to Bitcoin, it's like you can't touch it, you don't understand it. I don't see it happening fast here.
really? That's so interesting. I would think that it's just kind of like it's like you have to trust it, but really you have to trust. It's not as much that you have to trust Bitcoin, but you have to trust that the person who told you about it is telling the truth if they're very confident about it. It's
Yeah.
almost like my dad bought some Bitcoin yesterday, and he doesn't. I don't think he would ever trust it or really have any desire to dive deep into it if I didn't tell him, "Hey, I've researched this a ton. I know it. Just take my word for it." And he's like, "Okay," and he spent 1 hour looking at it and then bought some. And I wonder if the same kind of thing could happen there. Um, yeah. What other kinds of things do you think about? I mean, do you learn about the other countries down there? Do you spend your time thinking about specifically the payments industry? Are there other things that you've learned or study
Yeah, I mean, with
in the
Village
area?
Capital, I did touch quite a bit on healthcare, education, like other solutions. I think it's very interesting the how almost everything at the end of the day is going to touch fintech or financial inclusion. It's like it's one thing to have an amazing education platform like Platzi. It's an amazing online course platform originally from Colombia, huge in Mexico. But at the end of the day, it's like, well, how are people going to pay you? How are you going to make the commissions at the right balance so you can continue to run your business so you're not transferring those commissions to the client, to the students? And especially on like what we're seeing with hacking schools, online learning platforms, is how are the students going to afford it? So lending, payments, like it touches everything transversely. Um, and I guess the other thing that I've been learning a lot about with the founders here at Oyster is the entire underbelly of the financial system, and just the infrastructure. And I think that's where the huge opportunity in Mexico and Latin America is like the infrastructure of payments and banking is so complicated to work with in Mexico. For example, when you want to transfer money from one bank to another, instead of like ACH in the US, we have something called SPAY. All SPAY transfers
Hmm.
go directly through the Mexican Central Bank, Banxico. The type of code technology that they use is very old. It's not something that's very
Mm.
common, so it's very specialized. So you'll see that the biggest banks are directly connected to Banxico, but all of us emerging players, especially people who don't have so much payments expertise, we have to work with an intermediary because we don't know how to connect to Banxico, or we might not have the right license to connect to them. And there's basically one intermediary who has a monopoly on the entire system. So prices go up. So there's higher commissions. So when you transfer money from one account to another, there's often commissions, there's often limited hours. Those are all things that we're either eating ourselves or eliminating for our customers at Oyster. But like, I think that infrastructure of like open banking, how do we get data shared across financial institutions to do better underwriting? How do we better collect the data on our customers and do the know your business, know your customer, and the KYC, so that we could underwrite more people and give more financial solutions to clients? How do we innovate in different data sources and not just rely on the single or the credit bureau? That's the same institution from, again, 50, 100 years back. That's an institution of Mexico. And how do we use people's mobile device, other ways that they're connected to technology to understand who people are? So I think there's all these infrastructure pieces where, like, in the US, you connect to Yodlee. There's all your financial data done. We can't do that so easy in Mexico. And so that's where I think the huge opportunities are, is what we see as consumers are kind of like this tip of the iceberg of the consumer and business financial solutions and other solutions out there. But there's this huge iceberg of the infrastructure underneath that we're still missing.
Yeah, I'm curious if you're in charge, say you're the president, or maybe you're the in charge of all regulations, fintech regulations, banking regulations. What do you do? You say you have a dinner with the woman or man who's in charge. What's your piece of advice that you give them?
It's a great question. I mean, I think one thing that Mexico is definitely in the right direction with is we passed the Ley Fintech, the fintech law, a few years ago. We're just between the end of last year and this year registering the first like e-money licenses, fintech licenses. And the good thing is that creates clarity. But there's so many little details to the fintech law. Like fintech companies are only allowed to move money. They aren't allowed to do any lending operations. Fintech companies are not backed by the central government. So like in Mexico, we have the IPAB, the IPAB, that if a financial institution basically gets under problems, that the government will come in. It's like the Fed. They'll come in and help those banks. And so clients feel like, great, the IPAB's there. I know that my money is safe. In Colombia, with their fintech regulation, to a small level, but to some level, the government is also backing up those fintech accounts. In Mexico, the fintech accounts aren't backed by a central government entity. So I think that there's just a lot of different details in the way that together we could work to achieve financial inclusion by having these kinds of aspects to the regulation that will create more trust with consumers, that will make people want to use fintechs, that will create more competition, that will create more collaboration, honestly, as well. And that really will help all the boats rise together.
Yeah. It seems like if you guys are building a great product, and when great products come out there, we just need the internet, and we just need people to have access to these things. And when they do, and they work, and there's not laws that specifically prevent you from what you're trying to do. Like, as a founder, someone working with founders, you can be creative to build something that works and maybe isn't explicitly illegal, and then you prove the legitimacy of the use case, and then you say, hey, we really need to change this law that makes every transaction go through the central bank, or whatever. That sounds like maybe a big rule to change, but some smaller rule, you can start to chip away at what might be overregulation in the banking industry, which made sense in the old structure, the old infrastructure. But now with the internet and with blockchain technology, maybe you don't need, these local buildings. And it does feel like it's an evolution. Like things are just kind of, they're going to move forward. And so it's like,
I think you hit the nail on the head there, that it's about collaborating with the regulators. Like, I think it's very easy as like a neobank to be like the anti-bank or against regulation. Like, you hear that message a lot. But with us, like, it's all about how do we work with the traditional institutions and how do we work with the government to get further together. And I think it's patience, it's education. Like, there are a lot of people in the government who don't understand what financial technology is. there's a lot of people not in the government who don't know what financial technology is. And so I think it's about how do we collaborate to create more education, more awareness? Like, how do we help the government understand what's going on with startups, how to incentivize venture creation? It's something that was a lot stronger in the last administration, honestly, and that I hope that the Mexican government can see the value in supporting ventures as a whole.
Yeah. What are the term limits there? How long do presidents stay in?
6 years, a little
Is it
bit
4
more.
years?
Yeah.
6 years. Yeah. Yeah. And when was the most recent election?
I think 4 years ago. I'd need to fact check that one. Yeah.
Yeah, coming up.
Still, he has a couple more
Yeah.
years.
Yeah, so it's
Yeah.
been a little while. Interesting. Interesting. Yeah, it does feel like I really love Mexico, just given the fact that it's obviously a very beautiful city in every way, or country in every way, but also it's just, there was this one woman I met down there who was working in a co-working space, and she was trying to raise money to invest in startups, and it just feels like people are really hungry.
Totally.
And yeah, so at Otter, the company I run, we focus on Argentina, and very similar, down there, where people are tired of the banking system. Their inflation is terrible, like
Yep.
absolutely awful in Argentina. And so blockchain has been like huge, and Bitcoin has been huge down there. And I think most people see it as the answer is to circumvent the system.
Yeah.
Use it as little as possible, move on. And yeah, we pay about 50% of the developers that work with us in Bitcoin. Um,
That's
which
amazing.
honestly surprises me. They
Wow.
prefer it. And my guess is that goes up over time too. And yeah, yeah, super interesting. Where can people find you? Or are you online? Do you use
Yeah.
social networks, Twitter, LinkedIn,
I'm
or?
pretty much everywhere as Amanda J LA, like Amanda J as in Jacobson, LA as in Los Angeles, because that was the first email I
Mhm.
created when I got into college. And so I've just stuck with Amanda J LA, and that's pretty much everywhere. Probably the best is LinkedIn, Amanda Jacobson. There's probably only one of me in Mexico. So filter for Amanda Jacobson in Mexico, and it'll probably be me.
I love it. I love it. And you went to Venice High
Yeah, I
School in
did.
LA? Nice. Yeah, I lived in
Oh,
LA for
cool.
5 years, not far from Venice. So yeah, good spot to be from. Definitely a good place to learn Spanish if you're going to be in the
Completely.
U.S. At least.
No,
A good
Venice High
state,
actually, it was
good city.
70% Spanish speaking. Yeah,
No
yeah. I mean,
way.
not as a primary
Wow,
language
that's
for everybody,
crazy.
but like it's a very Latino community, and I think it's part of what got me to where I am today. Like having that so much cultural exposure to different kinds of people, and especially to Latin America.
Yeah. Are your
Yeah.
parents Spanish, or did you grow up speaking
No, my
Spanish in the
dad's
house?
actually British. My mom's American from Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
I grew up in LA. But I did have caretakers that were from Guatemala. So since I was born, I heard Guatemalan Spanish. And at the time, I couldn't say much more than, like, I want juice. But I think
Yeah.
the exposure helped. Like, I think it helped my accent. It helped my interest in the language and in the culture.
I love it. Well, this has been a lot of fun, Amanda. I'm really excited to get this out, and this has been a great conversation. I learned a lot, and congrats on all your
Thank
progress
you
with
so much.
everything.
And thanks for your time. All the best.
Yeah. All right. Take care.